Hey everyone, it's Alex back again. This time we're going to be talking about Final Cut Pro. Final Cut Pro. This is a little introductory tutorial, and if you're in my video production class, there'll be some resource files that you can take and apply here in this lesson to get acquainted with the program. We're going to talk about how to set up a project and how to do some basic cuts and basically navigate your way through this program. And once again, you'll find the files you'll need in that resource folder, right? It's the video production editing resources and tutorials folder, which will be on your external drive or in the documents folder of the program, the computer you're on. And there'll be a folder here that's called Bike Music Video. And inside you'll see there's just a couple of files basically of bicycle, riding bicycles through this kind of like mountain kind of canyon area. And this is going to be an exercise in just kind of practicing using Final Cut Pro and also cutting together a music video using this stock footage. And there'll be a couple different options here for different different angles to use and different setups. Okay, so make sure you get that folder, the bike music video, and just put it aside for now somewhere, either on your external drive or keep it in the documents folder. But yeah, we'll talk about Final Cut Pro. Final Cut Pro has evolved a little bit over the years. It actually went through a big makeover in, I think it was around 2011 or so, when Final Cut Pro 7 jumped to Final Cut Pro 10, and they actually kind of revamped the interface. Not everyone was a huge fan of that, myself included. I kind of was a fan of the Final Cut Pro 7 interface, a little bit more similar to Adobe Premiere. So if you like Adobe Premiere, I think you'll find the old Final Cut was more similar to that. This Final Cut, though, is still very useful, and it's actually a little bit more akin to iMovie. It's more of an advanced version of iMovie. So especially if you're coming from just using iMovie, which a lot of my students are, you'll find it very intuitive. It still works with events. It still works with some of the same panels over here that you'll recognize, and it will kind of naturally lend itself to someone who has some iMovie knowledge. But anyways, we're going to get started here. So if you want, you can follow along as usual. Feel free to hit the pause button or just follow along with the video if you'd like. We're going to go ahead if you feel like it, launching Final Cut Pro, and it should bring you eventually up to this window here. If there's any kind of welcome windows or anything, you can get rid of those. And the first thing we're going to do is just talk about the interface. All of these editing programs have a very similar layout. Over here on the right side, upper right side, there's usually a preview window where you can preview the raw footage you're using or the final product. Usually on the left here is where you'll see some sort of window. Sometimes it's down here in the bottom left where all your resource folders will go, all your media, all the stuff you're bringing in. And then down here usually is your timeline or assembly. So this is where you're going to be assembling your cut, down here. And there's some shortcuts you see here: create new project, import media. These are kind of like little shortcut buttons that you can use. One of the things with Final Cut Pro 10 is they kind of revamped it to make it a little more intuitive. I think it was to make it a little more attractive to consumers. Not so much prosumers. I mean, it's prosumers use it, but it's trying to open it up more to like a mass audience. So that was why it seems like they simplified it. Although it can still do everything the old Final Cut can do for the most part, minus a few elements they outsourced a little bit. It's just a little bit disorienting for people who are used to the older one. But anyways, we're going to get started here. You'll notice on the upper left-hand corner here, I'm just going to bring the window down so it's a little more visible. You'll see there's something that says libraries. This is very similar to the libraries you might see in the newest versions of iPhoto or just Photo, I guess it's called now, and on your Mac and other programs where they basically have libraries where it's going to store all the different contents that you have. Think of this as a master bin or library for all of your event files. So you can have a library for all of your events and projects on your computer. You can have one on an external drive. You can have multiple libraries. Typically, you might just have one library unless there's a reason to divide them all. So for now, I created this video class library right here at the top. And to do that, again, you just come up here to File, New, Library, and then you can give it a name. And you'll start off with a general untitled library, and you could just give it a name and you could always just keep one library for everything, all your projects, all your event files on your computer. Or if you want, maybe you want to divide it between, like me, I want to have one for the video production class. I might make another one for my home, editing needs. I might make another one for company, corporate needs. You could divide it however you'd like. Maybe I want to put one on an external drive that's specific to a film I'm doing, like if I'm doing a big film project. But in general, I'm just going to keep one right now and just call it video class. And there's always a default event that comes with that. You'll remember event files from iMovie, right? The event files contain all of the video content. They're kind of like almost like the package that contains all the video content, all the video files. So there's always like an event file that you'll call upon, or multiple event files that you'll call upon for your project. So it's going to be a similar way you get started here in Final Cut Pro, just like you do in iMovie. You start a new project, you start a new event, that kind of thing. So I want to start a new project. We're going to get started here. So I'll come up. I could use these shortcuts if I'd like. Definitely could do that, or I could just come up here and go File, File, New Project. And then you can see it's going to ask the event that I want to use. Now there's a default event here, and it's actually the event that just came along with the creation of my library. So what you could do is you can actually start off File, New Event, and create a specific event file, or you could give this one a different name. So I'm going to go and call this bike video. You can put it in the video class library. So I can see I have bike video. I could have used this one and just renamed it, but it's really either way. You can either file a new project and use that default event that you have there, or you could do File, New Event, and create your event first, whichever you prefer. But now that I've created my specific event, and this one, whatever, I could delete it if I'd like, move event to trash. You always have to have at least one event file in your library. It wants me to rename it there. I don't want to rename it. So hold on just one sec here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my project file. So I'm going to go to, actually I want to be in Final Cut Pro. I'm going to go to File, New, Project. I'm going to say bike video, or whatever you want to call it. And then in the event, see, I'm going to choose bike video here. Now it's the only option, so that's the one I would choose. And this other stuff, just for now, you could leave set based on first video clip. That means it will give you the video properties based upon the clips you bring in, which is fine. And then we can leave this all default. Some of this stuff gets more advanced if you want to make manual adjustments. We don't really want to do that. We want it based on the the file settings, the frame rate, the size, all of that of the video clips that we import. So I'm going to click OK. And notice what it does here. See this little bike video icon here. Down here, timeline actually has the timeline. It has the time, right? It's empty right now. And you can see this little thing appears here. So we've started our project. Now there's three ways you could bring in files. There was that import media button you saw here earlier. That was one way. The other way is you can come here, click on your event file, and just go to File, Import, Media. And you'll see it brings up a window in a second here. It's this window that kind of, it's a typical window for navigating to your files. So I go into my hard drive, and then I navigate. You can see right here, bike music video, and then all the files are here. And these are the files I want to bring in to edit. So I can go ahead and actually click on one of them, and it brings up a little preview. You can hit this little button here, and you can see a little preview of the video, just to make sure it's the video you want. So so I know for a fact this is what I want, right? And normally what I would do is I want all these files, so I would click the top one, I'd hold Shift, and then I'd click the bottom file. So they're all selected, they're all highlighted, and I'd hit import all right here. But you know what, I'm going to cancel that because I want to show you there's actually a third way to bring files in, and that would be if I go to Finder, okay, I go back to my drive, have to navigate here into all the resource tutorials, bike music video. You can actually go and you could manually grab a file and drag it down to your timeline like this, and then you see what happens here. It's in my timeline, so it's in my preview window right over here, right? But it's also up here in my event files. So if I come up here, I can actually play it up here. So that's another thing. You could actually drag them in and put them manually on your timeline if you wanted. But really, you should probably do it the other way. I just kind of wanted to show you this option. So I'm going to go File, Import, Media, and yeah, let's go ahead and just bring them all in. Import all. And you'll see this little box comes up, Add to existing event, right, bike video, copy. We want to copy the files into the video class library. Don't worry about this stuff. Import folders, yeah, that's fine. And then we'll click import. And now you can see it brought in little thumbnails of them all. This is just like iMovie where you could stretch them out, I mean you can shrink them down so they're just represented by a thumbnail, or stretch them out so that they're longer. You remember that little slider in iMovie? That's why people say this is very much kind of like a big brother to iMovie now. So it's really up to you know, it's a way to kind of look at the files more on a kind of almost frame by frame basis when you drag it out like that and expand it. And that helps you again in kind of selecting. Remember the yellow box? Same thing here. You can go and you can click and you can select the content you want. Just like in iMovie, you could drag it down here and put in your timeline. So if you wanted, you could treat this very much like you did in iMovie. That's why people kind of consider it, you know, an expansion of iMovie. You know, maybe I come here and I say, again, however much I want to zoom in on this, I say I want just, oops, a little bit of this right here, right on the jump to right there. And if I want, I can come back to the head of the clip and adjust it like that. I can go ahead and do that and then just drag it right down here. See? And again, at the very bottom here, you'll see the same thing. Let me shrink it down. You should see this little slider. See on the right-hand side here if you want to see your timeline stretched out more frame by frame, or if you want to see it more collapsed. So it's really just, it doesn't make the video any longer, it's just how it displays it. Very similar again to iMovie. The differences come in the method that you'll probably prefer using, which is using mark-in and mark-outs. So this is where it gets a little similar to Adobe Premiere. So if I wanted to add more content here, instead of doing the dragging of the yellow box, which you're all used to from iMovie, like that, what I could do, let me stretch it out a little more. What I could do is, let's say I want to bring in, right as he's coming around this corner, I hit I, the I key on my keyboard, then I just come over here, see that little red line, that's my scrubber. I come over right to where I want to be, right about here. I hit the O for out, and you note it made my mark in and my mark out. That's what it stands for, I for in, O for out. And I could hit O again and resets my out, or I could hit I again and resets my in. So it's a little more precise, You could find the exact frame you want and just hit I. You don't actually have to drag this slider, although you could still drag the slider if you like that kind of feeling of just kind of having your mouse and dragging it to the moment you want. But otherwise, the I and the O is kind of the standard. It's used in Adobe Premiere and also Avid for making your mark in and mark out. And then I could go and the little hand grabs it, puts it down here. I could also, here, let me click here and delete this. Just hit delete. I could also have come down here and see there's a couple buttons right here. There's a button here, you can see the little tooltip comes up. It says append. If I click that, it grabs the file. Same thing as if I grabbed and dragged it. It automatically puts it on the end of my video. So I could go here and I can make another selection, dragging, or I could do again, I, O, and choose a little piece I want. Hit the append button right here, slaps it right onto the last clip at the end. So append just adds it to the end, and that's sort of how you can build your cut. You could also use this one right here. Now this is the insert. So let's say I was like, oh, you know what, I actually want to add something in the middle here. I could come up here and say I'm going to do my mark in, my mark out just of that moment there. And then I could hit the insert, and wherever this scrubber is here on my timeline, it's going to put that video. See what it did? It kind of made room for it. It just inserted it. So that's an insert. Different than append. If I hit append, it would have put that little piece at the end there. So that's how you could add content. So this is really the basics of how you can add your files down here one by one. Very similar. Again, you could use the iMovie method, very similar to iMovie, or you can kind of use the mark in and mark out method. The other thing is once you're down here, you can make adjustments. You could grab the end and see what happens. It turns into that little slider icon, and you could drag the file to make it longer, or drag it this way to make it shorter. I could go on this end, and I can make it shorter or longer. See what it's doing? It's adding more to the head of the file. Maybe I want to see a little more of her there. And it's showing a little preview here. So this screen will become whatever file you're working on. If you're up here, it'll be the raw footage. If you're down here, it will be your timeline, your assembly, what your movie essentially is. Okay, and you can drag to make it smaller, drag to make it bigger. You could click to delete the whole thing. You know, that you could go ahead and click this and maybe drag it over here, put it in, rearrange them. See how it's see that little blue line, making room for it. Move stuff around. Okay, so we sort of talked about the basics there, and there's a couple other, you know, a couple tools here you could try out if you'd like. There's like the blade, if you wanted to come in and kind of cut the video like that in half, make a piece of it, you know, and come over here and then select. Say you want to just get rid of that little piece there. And there's also the little keyboard shortcuts here too, if you wanted to just use B for blade, A for select, so on. Trim tool. Some of these other ones, the zoom would be similar to just using the slider to zoom in and out. So you can play around with these also. The blade and the select in particular will be the big ones you'll probably use. It's all about just rearranging down here, because basically you're cutting in two different ways. You're making selections up here, and then allowing them to come down here with whatever method, and then down here you're making adjustments. You know, after you kind of play it and see how it plays out, and you know, saying, oh, I want to make a little tweak here or there. So, you know, you want to make this fast-paced. Again, editing is kind of about, especially music videos, are about pacing it. A lot of it will have to do with the music you choose. I would recommend bringing in some music and that sort of thing. The other thing is you might play the file and notice, well, not all of them, some of them, have like that right there, a little sound attached to it. Now, probably, unless you want that sound for some reason, because these other files don't have practical sound attached, you'll probably want to detach that audio. So to do that is you select the file. This is the one, right, that has the sound. I can hear it, little bike sound. You're going to control-click or right-click, and you're going to go detach audio. And you'll see down here, bring this little audio down here, and then I can go ahead and I could delete the audio, so it goes away. So that's something you probably want to do for the music video, because it'll probably just be music you're playing, right? You don't want the sound that comes with the video for this exercise. And when we start to edit other files in Final Cut, when you bring in dialogue and stuff, your audio will come down here. You'll do the same kind of stuff you do in iMovie or in Adobe Premiere, where you can make the levels higher or lower. It's a little more nuanced, though, in Final Cut and Premiere. Okay, so what are some other things to talk about? Well, you'll notice over here, you have a lot of the same bells and whistles that you had in iMovie. For instance, I could go here and I could add transitions, right? Cross dissolves and, you know, what do you got, circle and all this kind of stuff. You just go ahead and drag it over, put it in between the clips that you want to, you know, cross dissolve between, and it'll give you that kind of effect there. You like to dissolve kind of like that. Or maybe I want to use the circle here. Drag it over. A little circle effect. Oops. See if it's... I think this one is just oh yeah, you know what, it's going very fast, I think. So that's something else to talk about, is you probably want to set the timing of these things. If you go ahead and double click you'll see it expands the window, and then you can kind of expand the length of the transition. There'll be a limit to how much you can do, though, based on what the clip is, and then you can kind of see what it does. This is actually, looking at it now, it might just be the fact that it's dissolving into a similar clip, so or circling into a similar clip. So let me actually put this on another one. That's right, because it's the two back-to-back. So I'll delete that, bring my circle over here. There we go. Now I get that nice circle. Let me make it a little bigger. Again, double-click, you can kind of expand it and drag it to the extremes that it allows you. Really depends on how much information's there. And then we got a nice little circle effect. We got a nice little dissolve there. So some of these little, transitions you can throw in there. You'll also have titles. And again, there's probably more options here than you're used to because of the fact that we're in iMovie, so it will have more options. You also will have effects. You get some effects you can throw in here. You can try some of these distortion. This is actually audio. If I want to do some of these ones like the keying effects and different things here, you can drag some effects over and see what they do. Music, same thing here. You'll come here to music, and then it'll load your your iTunes and your iLife comes with sound effects, so you might want to look at some of those. Final Cut Pro comes with some sound effects, so you can go ahead and explore those folders. So you just come down here and play some of those. Or maybe you just want to load your iTunes folder and look at your music. See what I got here, a couple of different options here. So, you can come in, it's like throw a random song on here. Just going to drag it onto the, whoops, don't want to do that. I want to put it underneath here, actually. So you see it just kind of drags underneath. And now I've got a nice kind of nice sound. Nice music to play with my video.
Though you're past your baby days, still you've got those baby wings. You're as bashful every time that I'm with you.
Right. And maybe the rest of the cuts that I do, I can kind of base on that music. And, this is a particularly long song, it looks like. So I don't know if I would use all of this. But, you could shorten it, drag it, see like the edge there. It's a lot of drag and drop kind of control. And, decide what portion of it you want to use, and then, kind of get out of it from there. Now, the other thing to think about is the levels. If you notice when I hover over the sound, there's a little tooltip that comes up. It says 0 dB decibels, so I can go down if I want to go lower volume, or I can go up if I want to go higher volume. So that can help with adjusting the volume level of your music.
What is it?
Okay. So really, those are the basics of Final Cut. That's how you add music, add sound effects. That's how you cut. There's a couple other items over here you can play around with, different effects. There's a couple other things here like color correction and stuff if you want to mess around with that. It's got the auto enhancements too. You can play around with. It's a little bit more intuitive, and some people will find it very natural, so it's really taster's choice. But anyways, I might eventually get, oops, let me go here, drag this. So let's just say this is obviously not, what would be considered finished, but let's say this was my finished movie, and I played it through and I liked it and I was happy with it and I wanted to export it. Well, what do I do from here? When you get to that stage, you just come up to the top here, at the very top of the screen, where your tooltips are for final, not tooltips, rather, drop-down menus are. Okay, you come up here, go to File. Now you see there's Export Event XML, but really what we want to do is go to Share. This is just like in iMovie. This is the new kind of terminology that they're using. It's Share now instead of Export. So you're going to go Share, and there's a couple different options here. You want Master File Default. Okay, there's a couple things, YouTube, etc., and those are shortcuts for kind of encoding it for those different types of situations. But master file will give you the master file that we kind of want to store and archive. So master file comes up. and you go through, you look here, say this video is, give it a different name, or I'd say bike video, whatever. There's tags. Yeah, this is more for like online stuff. And then you go ahead and you go next, right? Make sure it's QuickTime Movie. It's doing the default settings, which I'm getting 640 and 2398. That's what I want. Next. So you should end up with, right here, your master file, bike video movie. So that's basically it. That's how you share it. And one other thing to remember, let's say we leave Final Cut Pro and we want to come back into it. So we reopen Final Cut, close some of this stuff here. So we reopen Final Cut Pro. Let's say I want to get back to see there's nothing here. You could go ahead and come back over here to your video class library, and you see projects here. Double click that, and it loads the bike video project. So here it is, it's back. So that's how I'd load it if I was revisiting it. So that's basically it. That's how you can get in and out of your project. So at this point, I'm leaving it up to you. Go ahead and import those files, those bike music files. Try doing some cuts. Try to put together a little, like again, 2 or 3 minute short, maybe even less, maybe even only like a minute and a half. It's really up to you. Really just keep it short. I mean, a couple minutes at most. Music video. Score it to some song that you like, and give it some rhythm and some movement, and try to use Final Cut and see how it works for you. And we'll be using Final Cut again for some other projects more, when we're editing our official movies and movies that have dialogue, that kind of thing. But this is a nice kind of exercise just to get you acquainted. You can play around with transitions and titles and effects as well, because it is a music video, which kind of lends to some style. And it's really about just kind of giving us that kind of like feeling of the energy and movement of the bike footage, of which there's quite a bit of stuff here. You can go through and take a look, and some of it is a shot from a different angle, and some of it is just different footage of the bikers going through the hills here. So play around with that and put it together. And if you'd like to bring in some outside material like images or whatnot, you can, but I would try to do what you can with this footage first and foremost. So that's Final Cut Pro, the beginning stages. Hopefully you should be able to start your project, get your assets imported, and set up your timeline and start cutting. So have a good one and enjoy.